Order. All right, I'm calling the meeting to order. You want to call the roll?
Commissioner Tucker. Here. Vice Chair Motter. Here. Chair Scharf.
Here.
Commissioner Phillips.
Present.
For the record, 4 present.
All right. Moving on to, I assume we have no agenda changes, additions, or deletions?
Actually, there is a change,
There is?
just a modification to agenda item number 4. It is an action item, not only for discussion, so I just wanted to make sure that the commission was aware. Thank you.
All right. So we'll be taking a vote. Is that what you're saying?
We'll be taking a vote and a request for action from the commission, from the presentation.
And minutes.
We do not have minutes from the last meeting. They will be incorporated in the next meeting, so
Okay, so there are no minutes.
no minutes.
Thank you for that. All right, so then do we have any public comment?
If any member of the public would like to speak on an item not on the agenda, please raise your hand or press *9 now. We have 1 hand raised online and we have 2 in-person comments.
Let's take the in-person first.
First would be Sven.
Good evening, and thank you all for being here. My name's Sven Thiessen. I'm a chemical engineer by training with 40 years experience. The first part of it was in air quality, working at power plants. The second part has been working on electric car policy. As a chemical engineer, I have embarrassment and a shame of my fellow engineers in that we have just discovered that natural gas stoves produce known carcinogens. We don't understand the actual chemistry, which is a joy, one of which being benzene. And if you are have your windows down and the fan not on, it reaches benzene levels that are 12x that of the World Health Organization's recommended standards. There's no standards for benzene really because it's a carcinogen for kids. Second of all, burning anything, because air is 78% nitrogen, N2, it produces oxides of nitrogen, and this directly leads to asthma in children. So I've been in Palo Alto 20 plus years, 20 some years now, and raised my kids here, and my elder daughter suffered from exercise-induced asthma. My father died of lung cancer. So anything I can do to educate the public, anything we can do, because we are supplying this product to our citizenry. It's like we're giving them cigarettes. And I'm not trying to point fingers, because we've just learned about this science that's particularly from Stanford in the last 3 years. And there's a whole bunch of articles, if you look up benzene in natural gas stoves, about this. It's not occurring in a vacuum, and you can measure it, well, not yourself, but if you have the right equipment, you can measure it yourself. And so what I'm asking is for the UAC to make this an agenda. The specific ask would be to make this an agenda item about what we can do as a utility that is providing a product that we now, I didn't say we knew it 20 years ago, like we knew we're hiding something, that we now know causes cancer, causes asthma, has serious negative health impacts to our citizenry. Me as the engineer, the joy, methane is a CH4 molecule, benzene is a C6H6 cyclic aromatic hydrocarbon. I just like saying that because it's fun. And we don't understand how it actually is formed in the combustion. It's not a contaminant. We don't understand the science. But what we do know is 2 things. 1, it's present. And 2, it poses a health threat to our citizenry. Thank you.
Thank you.
Could you repeat your name?
Yeah, first name is Sven, S-V-E-N, last name is Thiessen. I'm that guy on 314 Stanford Avenue with the free electric car charger that's given away over 400,000 miles since 2011, and the net zero passive beyond platinum lead home that's being toured by 4,000 people. I'm blessed that I can do these things. Thank you.
Who's next?
We have Avro.
Good evening, Utility Advisory Commissioners. My name is Avro Shah, and I'm a junior at Palo Alto High School. I'm involved currently with the Palo Alto Student Climate Coalition, of which I lead its advocacy committee, and I'm also on the executive committee of the Sierra Club Student Coalition. I'm here tonight because I recently started working with my colleague Sven, who's told you a lot in the last 3 minutes about these recent scientific findings regarding the impact of benzene and nitrous oxides as a direct result of gas stoves. And I'm not here to say that I'm an expert in any kind, but I do find it extremely, extremely important that we do act in a way that is responsible in the cognizance of these recent findings to work and educate the people of Palo Alto about what we're selling them. To me, this is really a common sense issue. If we know that the standards, the federal standards of nitrous oxides outdoors would say that in a kitchen, because the federal standards for nitrous oxides outdoors say, if we were to look at the kitchen, it's way too high. But with gas stoves in a kitchen, especially when there's not enough ventilation, especially when there's kids around, and kids are more susceptible to the effects of these findings, which say that higher rates of asthma, higher likelihood of developing cancer. Those are really, really important things that we have to acknowledge. And I urge you all to explore avenues to find ways to combat these health risks, just looking at what is a simple solution that we can do. And I know that there's bill inserts that come in the mail whenever we receive our utility bill, and our home does use natural gas. But I don't see anything about the health risks about natural gas. And I know that these are recent findings, but I hope that we can act in the light of those findings and do something to include information that can be sent out to people in Palo Alto who use natural gas to say, you know, this is the extent and the consequences of using natural gas, and potentially explore avenues to alternative solutions. Once again, these findings are recent, and we're not here to point fingers or say, oh, you should have been doing this, you should have been doing that, but just act in the cognizance of these findings and do what is right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next comment is online. Hamilton.
Hi, my input tonight is about strengthening Palo Alto's critical infrastructure so that it remains operational during a major power outage, such as after a large earthquake. First, the Public Safety Building, PSB, is a top candidate for a city microgrid. The PSB, which houses 911, the police department, and the emergency operations center, currently has 72 hours of backup power through a generator and fuel supply. It also has a solar array on top of the adjacent garage that feeds into the PSB. When the PSB was built, there was a plan to add battery storage for that solar array, but it was eliminated for budget reasons. Restoring the battery storage would extend the PSB's backup power well beyond 72 hours and make it far more resilient. It would also allow solar power generated during the day to slightly reduce late afternoon peak loads on the city's grid. Today's LFP batteries are mainstream, affordable, and far safer than the older lithium-ion options, making this a practical and forward-looking investment. Second, reliable communication information during an outage, such as after an earthquake, is essential. Within Palo Alto Emergency Services Volunteers Organization, which has 700 city residents, we are recommending AT&T Fiber over Comcast because AT&T's passive fiber network is designed to stay online for at least 72 hours after a citywide power outage, provided the residents power their local fiber modem. I've personally had it work for 2 8-hour outages at my house. Volunteers depend on that internet to report critical incidents to cloud-based servers. I would like to know how long the city's fiber huts remain powered during a full city outage, and will the city's planned fiber service remain up as long as residents keep their modems powered? In the event that the city does end up offering fiber, it would be a shame if we had to recommend AT&T over them because they couldn't match the AT&T specs. The good news is that LFP portable battery technology has advanced dramatically in the last 5 years. A reliable UPS battery to power home fiber modem and route them for 24 hours costs about $500, and a solar panel to recharge it around $200. That makes it realistic for households to stay connected during a power outage. And this isn't just about emergency response. Many Palo Alto residents conduct important business from home. For them, uninterrupted service is not just convenient, it's vital for business continuity and a deciding factor in which fiber service they choose. Thank you for listening to my comments.
Thank you.
No additional hands raised.
Okay. And now I guess we move on to utility director's report.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to give some, frankly, considerable updates from council. On September 8th, the council extended the term of the Palo Alto Residential Go Green Energy Financing Program that did go to the UAC from 2 to 5 years. And we also restated the city ordinance restating procedures to expedite permits for processing electrical vehicle charging stations. On September 15th, council adopted voluntary residential electric time of use rates that also went to the UAC and per the recommendation of the Finance Committee. And also in regards to that, the council did concur with the UAC and the reasonable cost analysis required by Prop 26 for the gas cost of service analysis. They also wanted the UAC to revise these schedules to be effective of January 2026. The third phase agreement was also approved for the Trolley Energy Battery Storage Project by council, so very pleased with that. As you may recall, that's over a 20-year term, which will allow 50 megawatts of battery storage and one of the first battery projects in Palo Alto. On the 29th, City Council voted actually to pull the USC work plan. So the work plans that went to council on the 29th were pulled. As such, the city manager directed staff to continue to work with the commissions with the action items and work plans as they are. So we'll continue with that. We anticipate that will go back to council probably early 2026 for the adoption. Staff will be continuing to work as if those plans were approved, and we'll bring those back and bring those items back to the UAC. So I wanted to provide that update. Staff is currently updating our city connection fees that will go for utility services. So these are the connection fees that developers would pay to, and these were updates that haven't been done since the pre-pandemic levels. So that went to the Finance Committee and will go to the City Council for approval, we believe on October 20th. And wanted to mention, since Mayor Ed Lowing is not here today, he is actually in Germany right now, Palo Alto's sister city. He's actually making a presentation in Heidelberg to the International Mayors Conference on how cities act as drivers for innovation and growth. And part of Mayor Lowing's presentation is actually talking about the electric utility and the public-private partnership with Tesla and upgrading one of the substations to meet their needs for growth for their AI data center. So we're very pleased to support him as part of that presentation. I'll also have a lengthy update on legislative updates because a lot of work and activity has been happening this session. So as you may recall, there was a West-wide Pathways initiative. So it is essentially an extended day-ahead market, which will allow entities working with the Cal ISO to schedule the previous day ahead, so we can actually get the use of more solar in California, going to the other western states and opening access to wind and other resources in New Mexico and Arizona. So this is a very positive attribute for us, and statewide, it should help increase affordability and use some of the solar that we have in California that is curtailed and be able to put that in other markets in the Western United States. The other item which we're very pleased about is cap and trade, which was set to expire in early 2030, has been extended to 2045. It's been rebranded now as Cap and Invest. So we will continue to see funds through the cap and trade program going both to the electric utility and natural gas utility. So as part of that, some of the other investor-owned utilities will not be receiving some of those cap and trade monies, and those will go to the electric utilities in those service territories. But that does not impact, we believe, Palo Alto, because we are not an investor-owned utility in terms of the gas side. So you provide you update with that as well. Some bad news I just heard literally 15 minutes ago. There was another Assembly Bill 1273. What this bill was going to do was the large hydroelectric extension from 2030 to 2045. And that really impacts Palo Alto because we have such a large commitment to carbon-free resources, working with WAPA, which is a federal hydropower. So unfortunately, that bill was vetoed. So we'll be going back as part of the next legislative process to try to get that exemption extended. There are other utilities that have 100% hydro and they're not impacted. So there's some equity issues here with Palo Alto. So we would like to bring that forward again. If we are not able to, we'll have to procure excess renewable requirements for our portfolio, and that will affect affordability and really compete with other utilities that are trying to meet their own renewable portfolio standard requirements.
Any sense of why the governor vetoed it?
This is just late breaking. I'm literally providing information I just received off the phone yesterday. Or excuse me, 15 minutes ago, maybe 20
Well,
now.
at least we'll have a new governor soon.
Well, I will admit that there's been a lot of good activity in regards to the Pathways Initiative, the cap and trade, an affordability bill. So there's a lot of positives. This one does impact us. This bill was added to an existing bill that had some intricacies on how rates were approved by the CPUC, which is really unrelated to Palo Alto. So we'll look at maybe separating that and having it as a standalone, but that will be something we'll be working on in the next session.
So you think it may be something else in the bill?
It may be something else in the bill. It may be something else that that was deemed, that was just too complex or maybe in conflict. So report the good news and the bad. I did want to provide some other good news. So as you may recall that the city received a natural gas infrastructure grant of $16.5 million. So we are processing our first reimbursement, which is a modest $455,000, but we are making progress. We'll be submitting that, and that's the period to the end of last fiscal year. I did want to also provide a fiber to the premises update. We continue to make progress on the FTT project, including recent permit approvals to a centralized building to store telecommunications equipment that will provide internet service. That building is known as the Fiber Hut. It will be located at our Colorado substation within the secured perimeters of the substation, to be noted as well, so it will be protected. We have our contractor, MP Next Level, began mobilizing to do that work, their pre-construction activities on the week of October 6th, and we'll provide additional updates as the construction progresses. I wanted to provide that update as well. Also wanted to mention that we had recently the NCPA annual conference. It was attended by Vice Mayor Venker, Chair Scharf, staff. It is one of the largest public electric conferences in California. It is the largest, with over 270 attendees, a wide range of public power entities and industries. Really, the conference focused on a lot of impacts affecting public power utilities. including the rise of AI data centers, energy markets, and wildfire. I know the AI data centers are a top item listed in our work plan. And spoiler alert, we'll be planning to bring that back to you in the December timeframe to this commission. So wanted to give you an update on that. And then I want to also mention that Councilmember Vinker and at the NCPA conference, NCPA General Manager Randy Howard, who has been in the helm for 11 years, is retiring. So he'll be retiring probably in May of 2026. So they are actively looking at his successor. Vice Mayor Vinker is also on the executive committee to NCPA. So she'll be very actively engaged on the selection of their new general manager. And that completes my report.
Thank you for that. And that brings,
Greg, could I please?
sure, go ahead.
So thank you. And I think it's so important that we have this report on what you've observed from a utility point of view at council and at finance committee meetings. And then that comes back to this UAC to close the loop. I've commented often that I think the loop needs to be stronger. And so just to touch on a couple of the things you mentioned from recent council meetings, time of use is on the agenda today. So I assume we'll get into a lot more of the detail and the color from conversations with finance committee and council on that. There were a lot of them in depth, very well informed questions and conversations on time of use that I look forward to. Trolley, the BESS storage and solar deal. We'll talk in a minute about the quarterly report, but the quarterly report says that deal fell apart at the last minute. Did the deal fall apart in the last minute? Because it's in the headlines of the newspaper last week.
So the Trolley battery storage project is a standalone battery storage system. And as mentioned, I think in the presentation and part of the quarterly report is actually, we were looking at other PPAs with solar plus storage. So those did not move forward in terms of, so that was a separate project. Trolley in itself as a standalone battery project, yes, that was executed. So we're moving forward with that. We had some other potential power purchase agreements. I'm sorry for using three-letter acronyms for solar with a combination of battery. Those did not move forward
Okay.
for recommendation. So
You can imagine the shock to read in the quarterly report that the Trolley, I think it's Appia or something like that, the Trolley deal had fallen apart at the last minute. So glad to know it didn't. Connection rates, you touched on connection fees. These are not something that have come before UAC, is that correct? Because they're big, they're substantial. They affect residents as well as commercial. And the increases, I mean, some increases went from no fee at all to hundreds or thousands. Those fees that existed already, whether we're talking about electric, gas, or water, went up by 40, 60, 80%. Was there much discussion at finance about this significant increase in connection fees?
Thank you for the question. So we did actually, as staff, one of my questions was, have these come back or come to the UAC in the past? And they have not. They have gone to the finance committee. There was a detailed discussion on those rates. As I briefly mentioned, they were last updated pre-pandemic levels. So what we did is we went through a very robust process of looking at all the components related to those fees. Now, these fees are established to really reduce the administrative burden. So if they're a standard type of installation, we don't have to do an estimate for them. So in the past, we would do an estimate, right? So we would go through that process and do an individual estimate for those customers. So what we found is that we could standardize those, and this is not uncommon in the industry, and provide that as a standard standalone cost. So that developers, residents, anyone who's making those connections know what they're looking for. And as part of that work, we had to update some of the costs, not only for labor, or for our contracting costs, equipment costs, and frankly, disposal. So one of the issues were that we had much higher disposal costs that we had to incorporate. So they're really cost recovery. And to make sure that when customers do, new customers, connect to the system, that we are making sure we're being made
Yeah,
whole.
I don't want to challenge that we have rates, connection fees, or that our fees are wrong or too high.
Mm.
I'm simply saying that, first, I was stunned at the increases, the percentage increase in these fees, and they weren't chump change. They, again, hundreds or thousands of dollars for a home that wants to connect underground, overground, et cetera, electric or gas, depending on the width of the pipe. They were really large fees, and I think it's worth asking whether that's the sort of thing that comes before UAC or whether that's just an operational thing that we don't look at.
I
You're
will
not going to need to respond. It's just
Sure.
a question for us to think about going forward.
Sure. I will mention one of the items that did come through finance a little more in detail is that there was a disconnect fee for a natural gas service for a resident. So if a resident goes through the process and electrifies their home, there are monies in the SCAP program to pay for that disconnection. So if a resident decides to eliminate their natural gas water heater and, go to electrify their cooking in their home, and then now they don't need natural gas, the SCAP money has funds to pay for that abandonment of the service. So
Okay,
that
then I
was
guess I
one of
will
the
ask you
elements.
here, and since it came up at finance, do you think that this sort of thing should come before UAC?
I think part of our process is to follow that past practice of where it goes and where those updates go as well. I mean, if there is an interest by the UAC, we, as staff, try to be consistent in what comes to UAC in the past and what has not. We plan to actually bring these forth for future updates as part of the municipal fee schedule updates. So that will be incorporated with a larger process with the city. So it'll be part of the city collectively. So it wouldn't be something we could potentially tease out. It might be information that we could provide to the UAC if that is such of an interest. But our hope is to get it on a cadence such that that those fees remain current.
My personal view is that when an item like this is coming before council or finance in the weeks ahead, that be flagged, notified, brought to the attention of UAC, especially given the magnitude of the size of the fees.
I think I agree with Chris. I mean, in general, if it's going to affect our residents' pocketbooks, I think, and it's not just operations and it's a choice of how much you charge in a fee. I think we should probably weigh in on it, especially if it's something that goes to finance. That's my general opinion.
Can I clarify? It's full cost recovery. Like that's the basis, right?
Yes, the basis of these fees is a cost recovery fee. So if
There's
there
not any
was,
that's like reserves and like, back to the general fund or anything else. It's just straight cost recovery.
these are straight cost recovery for the utility for services rendered. So just,
So your point, Alan, I think about it,
Yeah.
your point out and Megan's point is that these costs are not debated about what they should be. They're just full cost recovery because so I guess the question is then why does it go to finance? Because they just have to approve the new fee, right?
if there's a fee increase, that
We
would
approve it.
go to the finance committee, or it could go separately as a potential action.
All right.
Did we agree to something here or?
No, I
not?
don't think we agreed to anything. I was just taking into concern. In fact, we haven't agendized this item. So all we're talking about is whether or not this item should come to us. I just want to make that clear.
Correct.
So
There's no action really taken here. I think what I'm hearing is maybe we would bring that back as part of your next work plan when we update these fees, and these fees would be updated, they'd be updated by the construction cost index on an annual basis until we true it up on the municipal fee schedule, and that would be several years out. So if that puts it in any context.
okay, that's context.
Can I ask one other question? I did not follow fully council's discussion about pulling the work plan. Could you elucidate why the work plan was pulled?
I think there was a series of work plans that were granted to council at the same time. It wasn't specific to UAC. So I unfortunately don't have that information on what the specifics were. I'll look into the assistant city manager. Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. Kylie Nose, Assistant City Manager. When council members poll items, they don't leave a reason for the polling of that item. So it could be any number of reasons, whether it's UAC, ARB, HRB, or any of the number of commissions. We won't know until we bring it forward as an action item.
So
This
could
was
you-
just pulled from the consent calendar.
Correct.
So, and a particular and somebody on the, somebody just on the council just said, I want that, pull that from the consent calendar.
Right. It does take 3 votes of the council members to pull an item from consent. So 3 members did support pulling the item from consent. And so what that means is it'll be agendized as an action item at a later date as schedules allow.
But there was no commentary from the,
There's not comment at that time.
And it's been, and you expect to hear it in January, is that what I heard?
Right now, yes, based on the tentative agendas of the council, they're full through December. But if something opens up, we'll obviously
And did the
adjust.
same 3 council members pull all the agendas that they wanted to pull? So it wasn't separate votes, or was it like? let's
No, it's
pull-
one vote because it was bundled as one item.
Okay, got it.
I'm not sure. And you said this would come back to us? I mean, why?
No, if I may have misspoke, that will come back to council for their
Okay.
approval back. So
Okay.
they will, to the extent that council has comments on the UAC work plan, then we would bring it back.
So it's been agendized for a time uncertain in the future, or did you say January?
So that's the preliminary kind of look in terms of when it may come back. As the assistant city manager mentioned, if it opens up sooner, then we'll know, and we can inform the UAC as well.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that brings us to our new business.
So this is the utilities quarterly report. This item is typically the round out of the year. So wanted to, thank some of the commissioners for providing some information on this report. Again, this is your report. We want to make sure it's useful to you, has the level of information and data and rigor that you would like to see. And any ideas in streamlining that report to see just, maybe there's some critical information you would like to see on the utility, and maybe there's some information that might not be as useful because it is in other areas. Maybe that's in the annual budget, our capital budget, and the like. So I want to introduce Carla Daly, who's our Assistant Director of Resources. She'll be leading the initial presentation, really highlighting on how this impacts to your work plan. We also have several staff members, both present in the chambers and online, to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Alan. So we do, this is a large report. It covers many, many topics, and given the other important items on your agenda this evening, we're trying to kind of focus on a couple of things that we think that the commissioners are interested in. Of course, like Alan said, we're available to answer questions. I'm going to whip through these slides very, very fast, and then we have staff on hand to answer questions. Next slide, please. So one thing that we know there's a lot of interest in is our electric demand. And so you will have seen in the report that by the end of the fiscal year that by the end of the fiscal year that we have seen some increase in load, mostly driven by data center load growth. Next slide, please. Also, for the electric utility, we did see higher revenue than expected from REC and RA sales, and therefore a decrease in our cost relative to budget, and some higher RA purchase costs that did result in, that we expect will result in some higher costs in FY 2026. Next slide, please. Sure.
Again, RA is resource adequacy, but I'm not quite sure I understand what you, if you could just take it from the top again.
Sure. Net supply costs for FY 2025 were lower than budget. mostly due to higher revenue received from renewable energy credit and resource adequacy sales. Our cost projections for FY 2026 are looking a little higher and driven by resource adequacy purchase costs and Western Restoration Fund costs higher.
I clearly need to do some homework on RECs and RA sales and how higher revenue can affect supply cost. I won't put you on the spot for that tonight.
You know, maybe you could just briefly explain why it's changing. Here we made money by selling the RA and now we're going to have to purchase it. And that's one of the drivers of why we're going from 77 to 99.
Jim Stack is online. I am going to pass it over to him because he explains things so well.
Call in the
Yes.
department.
I can handle that question. Commissioner Scharf, the reason we have both purchases and sales is because we have two separate requirements on RA. There's a local requirement and then there's a system-wide requirement. Local RA is for purchasing RA for generation resources in specific load areas or constrained areas.
I know what it means. I'm sorry to interrupt, but since we're going to take the time to go into this, thank you very much, Jim. Could you then explain what resource adequacy means and why we buy or sell it?
Sure.
It came up, for example, looms very large as we thought about the 50 megawatt battery deal. We thought about the timing of that deal in 2029 versus RA budgets for 27. I certainly do not understand what resource adequacy is and why we buy it.
Okay.
I don't know about the others.
Resource adequacy is a energy market product or kind of construct that's designed to ensure that the grid remains reliable all throughout the year. So it's separate from energy. It's just basically the ISO, the California Independent System Operator, gives all utilities requirements to come up with a certain amount of capacity. So kind of generation assets that can be called on when the grid is strained, in the afternoons during the summer, for example. And so we have to procure enough capacity to satisfy our peak demand that we have forecast, plus a little extra, like a 15% reserve margin. And we just have to, buy that attribute of generation assets around the grid, to satisfy those requirements and ensure that we have enough capacity that we can depend upon to keep the grid reliable all throughout the year, every month of the year. And so the reason we have some purchases and sales is because we have, in our portfolio, we have more than enough system capacity that we need, but we don't have enough local capacity. So every year we tend to sell some of our resources as system capacity or system RA. And then we also purchase some capacity in the form of local RA. So that's why we have.
Why don't you explain to us what the difference between system and local is, just so we got it?
Sure. Yeah, I was trying to get to that earlier. But local capacity is capacity that's located in certain constrained areas where there's high load relative to the amount of generation. For example, the Bay Area or the LA Basin. These are kind of areas where the grid operator, the ISO, is trying to incentivize more generation being built. And so there are kind of special requirements to, ensure that enough capacity is built there. And so the capacity gets priced a little bit higher. That's the reason for the difference between those two products.
Jim, I mentioned a moment ago the trolley battery storage deal. And when council discussed that, there was a lot of discussion about, this is great, but it's buying battery power from far away, Southern California. What about local grid scale battery storage and solar development? Is that the same distinction that you're drawing between local and remote? Are we? You know what I'm referring to?
I think I understand.
When you presented to council, you talked about you talked about Southern California's a storage deal, and that's what this 50 megawatt deal is. But the question came up from several council members: what are we doing to build local battery storage?
Yeah, in terms of building battery storage within the city itself, that's something that we look at from time to time. Every few years, I think we do a report to the state on, whether we should procure more storage capacity locally, whether we should set a requirement to purchase storage capacity either locally or remotely. And we do an assessment of what the costs are at the time. So far, we're finding that, there's not a lot of space for a large scale storage facility within the city limits. It's also quite a bit more expensive than it is to purchase capacity down in Southern California. It's also more economically beneficial for us to buy down in Southern California because they have so much solar down there that they have much more of a disparity between the middle of the day prices and the evening prices. We can kind of.
Thank you. I didn't mean to take you on a
revenue.
tangent. I'm sorry. Greg, did you have other questions?
No, I'm ready to move on.
Next slide, please. So we did add some information to this report regarding reliability, both for the electric utility and the gas utility. And again, I'm going to just briefly show these, and then we have folks online from engineering and operations can answer some more detailed questions should you have any. But the takeaway from the electric reliability is that we are about 5 times more reliable than PG&E's local system. Next slide, please.
So before you go on, that was the one question I had. When you talk about this being more helpful, I don't really care that much how we are reliable to PG&E. I actually care how are we reliable to Santa Clara and Alameda. I assume we're always going to be more reliable than PG&E. So if we're not, I'd want to know. But I really do. I've never sat in a meeting where you say, God, we are so less reliable than PG&E. So I'd really like to know how we are compared to Santa Clara.
So let me just give a little background. The reason why we look at PG&E as a neighboring is because of the location, and frankly, where we have some spaces that are similar to PG&E in Mountain View, in some areas where we have not only suburban areas, but we're also in the foothills. So having a neighboring entity with the same type of climate and frankly, if there's storms very similar, that's helpful for us to benchmark again. We can certainly look and we can, pick through data from Santa Clara and Alameda.
So Santa Clara would be the same, right? Same climate. It's a suburban, similar. They have single-family homes.
They have
in
single-family
their
homes.
neighborhoods.
Exactly.
We don't have foothills right in Santa Clara, if I recall.
They do not have any foothills. They're completely surrounded by other urban cities.
Right.
We can certainly provide some of those metrics as well, but that's some of the thought process and looking at that at the neighboring type of service territory in proximity to Palo Alto.
I mean, it's just been my experience sitting up here for a long time that PG&E is a low bar for a lot of things. I mean, we can disagree maybe, but I'm not sure we do. So I'd like to see Santa Clara. I'm not saying we shouldn't tell us about PG&E, but I'd like to know how we do with Santa Clara. And I'd be fine with you saying, yeah, in Santa Clara, our outages are more frequent, but they're more frequent because of the hills, right? I mean, that's a fine explanation.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to continue to see the PG&E comparison because in some sense, that's the alternative. If we, didn't have a utility here, we wouldn't be connected with Santa Clara, we would be on PG&E and presumably experience something similar. So, saying let's look at both. And I haven't been up here as
Look,
long
I'm not
as you
saying
have.
we shouldn't look at PG&E, but the point is they're always going to say we're better than PG. I've never seen us not be better than PG&E. But what I would say is, how are they running our utility compared to how Santa Clara runs theirs? They're both smaller. It's really a metric of how well is our utility doing? And you can't compare Palo Alto to PG&E. They're like completely different entities.
But it's the local, it's what is it? The local PG&E reliability, right? It's not PG&E system, it's the local.
It's one in Mountain View and Los Altos. So it's
Yeah,
close
so
in
I mean, I think it
proximity
is
and type
comparable.
and kind of the terrain. But what we can take that back is just add in the Santa Clara information, which we certainly can do.
I wasn't advocating for doing away with the PG&E. I was advocating
For the addition
Yeah,
of.
let's figure out what's going on in Santa Clara.
I also found the 5 times more reliable than PG&E's system. That made me, that's like reducing prescription drug prices by 200% or something. I had to really think about what that meant.
Next slide, please. Likewise, we reported some data around the gas system reliability. Most of the outages for gas are due to times that we need to repair broken or damaged mains, and it is by far most often those situations are caused by excavation by third parties. Next slide, please, or that might be it. That was it. So we do have a number of folks standing by to answer questions about those topics or anything else that you would like to discuss. Thank you.
Megan?
This may be something you need to come back on, but the cross-port program that we sort of contentiously continued funding a couple of years ago, can we get updates on that in these reports? And I think specifically, we decided to keep funding that because we thought that it was important to make sure that we were de-risking. Like the explosion risk is really significant. And there was a concern that, hey, we weren't finding anything. But if we are finding things, that may warrant us reverting back to an accelerated schedule. Or if the risk profile of those different groupings, clusters of customers that we were doing that analysis for has changed based on more information. I do think that that's something that we should be paying attention to.
Thank you for that. We are in the process of hiring some hourly employees to help us do that work. And yeah, we hear you that you would like to know what's going on there.
Yeah, it's where they worry. It's natural gas. It's where they worry that, tree roots.
Your microphone's, Chair, if your microphone's, thank you.
My bad.
If we're done with that topic, just a minor thing is on like figure 4, figure 5, the sales revenues and sales volume. Could you provide the totals? I mean, I was looking at these and you have percentage differences, but I can't look at those and get the total. So both presented in the report, but also on the slides. Also,
yes, absolutely. Thank you for that.
Please. Also, in the wastewater side, I noticed the capital work in progress, the WIP comes to $496 million. Is that's only partially going to be paid by Palo Alto, is that correct? And if so, what part are we paying? I thought ours was closer to 370, but maybe I'm mistaken. Is that the total cost or the cost we're paying? I'm talking about figure 17 on packet page 25.
So that's thank you for that question. So on that, it's page 25 of the packet. So that was, yes, $496 million. That was for the total construction cost related to the wastewater treatment plant. And then Palo Alto would be responsible for that share. Carla, I'm gonna try to put you on the spot, but I thought that was based on the flow percentage, which I think in the report was 37%. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
It's somewhere in that range, yes.
Maybe in the future reports, we'd include the Palo Alto portion as well, since I think, that's what I'm most interested in rather than the total. Thank you.
All right, Chris.
Yeah, I have a broader question about the quarterly report in general, and maybe this is something that we just need to sort of discuss here in the family, in the UAC itself. But as I understand it, these quarterly reports keep coming. They're obviously a lot of work to put together. I'm learning that they're actually just meant for an audience of us. Like these are produced, correct me if I'm wrong, for the UAC. And in my opinion, having looked at 3 or 4 of these now, I'm not even sure what they are. They're certainly not a financial report. They don't even have costs and expenses on a per utility basis. There's not a single mention of labor costs, for example, whether they're going up or down or what have you. Bob made the point that I've made in meetings before, which is it's hard to take a financial report seriously when I can't even see what the annual revenue is, the volume of gas sales is, the peak load of electrical for the year or for the quarter. You have to take out a calculator and add it up. It's been that way forever. There are statements in here that are simply, I don't know if they're false or somewhat confusing, but Palo Alto's electric supply portfolio is 100% carbon neutral. That's, as we all know, a bit of a loaded statement. And so I could go on, and I have written down a bunch of specifics taken somewhat at random and pass them to Alan and staff. Maybe we'll discuss it, but I think what we really need to discuss is what UAC wants from this report, if anything at all. It's not out of the question that this is just some vestigial thing that's been coming for years and years, and no one really wants it. I always assumed this was an important report for the public and city council and the media, but I get a sense actually that it's not that. And, if asked to decide right here on the spot, I'd suggest abandon the thing. So the question, I don't know if I guess it's mostly to us, is do we want to talk about whether this report meets our requirements or if we have any requirements at all, and if we want it to continue?
So I just want to address one comment because I think Palo Alto is very proud of being 100% carbon neutral in terms of buying attributes on behalf of the residents and businesses such that we are such, and that's been one of the council actions for years. So the utility and the city purchases those attributes for other projects. What we in the industry call bucket 3. In the state and around the country, so that we are that 100% carbon neutral over that total time frame. It is not on a per hour basis. So, I can see where your point in that regard, but I did want to just mention that as a clarification. Again, appreciate your comments, in terms of how we can revise and make this report better and more useful to the UAC. And to the public at large. So we can certainly take either comments back from the UAC now or individually and on what you think that may look like, and we could take that and bring some of those ideas forward.
I find the report useful as is. I mean, I don't really have any comments other than that.
My 2 cents is that transparency, both to our citizenry and, any people who are attending these meetings is really important. And this is our only tool for visibility into what staff are currently working on, what investments are being made, et cetera, after we approve a budget. So I value these reports. They certainly help orient me in terms of challenges broadly. And I think if there are additions or changes, we should absolutely talk about how to make them more valuable. But I think with the goal of transparency for a locally owned utility, kind of requires that we have some sort of report out.
Well, I don't think it serves transparency to have our largest, most important CapEx project, grid mod, is I think item number 11 in the long list of short updates that tells me that 66 telephone poles have been installed, but really gives me no sense at all of where does grid mod stand. Maybe that doesn't belong in a quarterly report. I happen to think it does. And it certainly doesn't match up with what we do in wastewater. I would eat my hat if anyone on our UAC could explain the cost analysis on the wastewater plant, which goes into, pay-go, financing and all of that, but really doesn't tell me what our cost position is in the wastewater project. So I don't mean to, I'm very sympathetic of staff needing to produce this very large report when you also have all the discrete agenda items that come up every month for us and for finance and for council. And then to also do this for just, you know, I don't think there's an audience for the report, at least not in the shape it is today. We can't call it a financial report. You know, it talks over and over about financial health, but doesn't talk about costs. It doesn't, you know, it talks about reserves with no explanation at all as to why we are in electric, for example, below our target reserve this year. And I don't know, it was a very short, I don't know, 10-word explanation as to why at the end of 26 we'll be above the goal. It didn't explain it or provide any numbers. So I'll stop there. And I will pursue it offline if it's useful, Director, but you know, I think Commission really needs to think about, since this is done just for us, not for the public, who I don't think looks at it, we should consider whether it's good use of time.
It's available to the public, right?
It's in the packet.
Yeah, it's agenda. It's
Yes,
available.
it's in the packet, it's agendized, and it has evolved, you know, as I understand over time, working with the UAC and what information they would like to see and what's useful and to the public so they can understand more about the utilities and how it's provided. Again, you know, this open to, as the commission sees fit, on making adjustments or enhancements to the report or subtractions.
Yeah, I hate to weigh in at this late date, but I had some of the same thoughts reading through it about, you know, this seems like a lot of work for staff to put this all together. Maybe it's not, maybe it's, you know, mostly boilerplate and it rolls, you put a few new numbers in. But, you know, I didn't have time to think about it, but basically this kind of quarterly report, the kind of content I would like to see, and most of it's in here, is, you know, updates on the key projects, you know, or news about things that impacted the utility in some way or the other, good, bad, or I don't know about indifferent, but good or bad, since the last time. Tracking metrics, you know, which the key metrics which we've established, and we talk about even in the work plan, how are those going over time? And then, you know, financial condition. And I think those three things, and then with a presentation, you know, like you gave, that kind of highlights, here's the, you know, most of it's, hopefully things are running down the middle of the highway, but here's 4 items you should be aware of that are, you know, veering away from what we anticipated. But I haven't really thought about it enough to really have much useful beyond that. I mean, I prefer it the way it is to like saying, well, let's just get rid of it, because I do get a lot of useful information from it. But I'm not quite far enough along to say, okay, here's A, B, C, D, and E that I think should be changed. So the question is, should we have a separate agendized item to discuss it? I don't know. Or should, you know, Commissioner Toogie, you and I could take it up with Alan.
I will add, just for historical context, last year was the first year we ever had a discussion on the quarterly report. In my long history of being an employee with this utility, it used to be always an information only report. And so this is the second time that we've had a discussion.
But no action is requested, it says here, so.
Yes, so now we can move on
Now
to
we can move on.
discussion of the preliminary analysis of the infrastructure impacts associated with gas decommissioning.
Jonathan Abenshine, Assistant Director of Public Works, Climate Action. My apologies. Will provide the presentation. Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. We just talked about this topic last month, so I'm going to move pretty quickly because I'm going to assume you all remember the scope, but I'm happy to go into more depth if you need me to. Next slide, please. So actually, before I move on to the slides, I just wanted to share the objective of this meeting here. So we have, so we talked about the scope last month and some of the instincts I think that this commission, which is, I think, very tuned into the gas system, has about what some of the challenges are going to be as electrification starts to, as we start to get more and more electrification. And we've made some preliminary progress on the report, and we want to bring back a few preliminary results that I think validate the instincts that this commission has. There's a lot more work to be done on the study. But one of the important reasons for sharing this, and I think this is probably a brief discussion with this commission, but it's also to share this information with the Sustainability Committee as well, where there is a broader discussion going on about how to fund the Sustainability and Climate Action Plan. And this is a very important financial piece to the whole puzzle. And we haven't had a lot of information about it. We've had instincts, but this is going to provide some validation about just what that transition looks like. So I won't go into this background slide. We talked about this last month. Next slide, please. And the study goals, again, talked about that last month. Let's move on to the next slide, please. And the study outputs, and I'm happy to go into any of these again if it's helpful. Next slide. So let's talk about where the study is at this point. So we have built out a system model that was completed in April earlier this year. And over the summer, we've been doing simulations of what Monte Carlo simulations of what electrification might look like at various stages of penetration of electrification into the community. One of the first things we had to do was try and figure out what equipment is out there so we could even run those simulations. So we did this equipment estimation based on gas equipment and a lot of other data that we have from the assessor and other information we have as a utility. And then we simulated main abandonment under various electrification scenarios. We also did some costs. We also started looking at the different types of costs in the utility and estimated how they're impacted by electrification. But we haven't gotten into evaluating impacts on particular customer groups, and we certainly haven't started identifying mitigations. And I know that's a topic that the commission is very eager to get to, but it's probably not one that we have a lot to dig into on tonight. So moving along. Next slide, please. All right, so these were the scenarios that we modeled, 20, 40, 60, and 80% reductions in gas sales. We held large commercial and industrial as showing no electrification. That's a simplifying assumption. That's not what we predict is going to happen. And then we looked at residential and small and medium commercial from 25% all the way up to 100% electrification. Next slide, please. These are the results of our estimated equipment population based on gas sales data and other data. We have noticed some inconsistencies in our underlying data. We think, I would say this is likely to be similar to the final results, but we do have some data cleaning that we want to do. So these numbers are likely to change. But
Jonathan, what did these numbers look like 5 years ago?
That is an interesting question and something that we'd have to pull gas usage going back 5 years and then have them run their simulation model on that usage. But that's something that we can do.
We've been pushing electrification
that
for
hard.
at least 5 years.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if the numbers haven't moved, then you're not achieving anything, and there's no reason to think you're going to get even close to this. Whereas if the numbers have moved significantly, if we were at 100% and now we're at 85, I could see it, but
I would push back on that actually pretty strongly, because
Why?
5 years ago, we were just barely starting to get a sense of the technologies that could be used to electrify. It takes a while to get for society, for builders, for contractors, for homeowners to get it, for first to even raise awareness that this technology exists, and for people to get their heads around how to get it installed. We've seen really significant acceleration in the last few years, but significant acceleration means that we're at a point now where about 6% of homes in Palo Alto have at least one electric appliance. And 5 years ago, that would have been microscopic. We were getting 1 or 2 heat pump water heaters per month. Now, I wouldn't say that we've unlocked how to drive high levels of electrification yet, but we've certainly learned a lot in the last several years, and we've gotten a lot of all electric appliances out into the community. So
we've been providing subsidies and offering heat pumps and all these things for how long?
Easily 5 years.
That's what I was thinking. I mean, I keep
Sure.
seeing this stuff come through, so.
I mean,
And
you
so
think
you're saying
back
we've
on-
driven about 6% change, but most people have not fully electrified. Most people have changed one appliance out. is
I'd
what
say
you're saying.
about 3% are fully electrified.
Okay. And we were probably, of that 3%, we were at 1% before, 0%.
Less than 1%, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So you're talking about an S-curve situation, you're going to have very slow adoption for a while. And then so either we will not figure this out or we will figure it out, and acceleration will start to ramp up really significantly. We have regional regulations that are meant to drive electrification. So I don't think that looking at the last 5 years and assuming that adoption is going to be exactly the same going forward is warranted.
Have you, I know we had some discussions at the UAC about the economics, how you were going to, I mean, at 85 and 82, that's a lot of money people are going to have to spend to electrify. And there was different stuff you brought to us. Has your thinking evolved on that at all?
I'm sorry, has my thinking evolved on?
Well, I mean, has your thinking evolved on how this is going to be driven by economics? If it's driven by anything.
Right.
So has your thinking evolved on how you're going to get there?
Oh, absolutely. And that's a lot of the conversations that we're having with the Climate Action Sustainability Committee. We are looking at different business models. We've been looking at different services that we've provided. The addition of both full service sort of turnkey assistance services really helped to accelerate the water heater program. We're looking at different forms of financing. We've been looking at an emergency program. We've done permit streamlining. And we're looking at expanding some of those tools into the multifamily and non-residential sectors in ways that we're aiming to develop scalable solutions over the next 2 years to drive electrification. Now, I think we're experimenting and we're going to see how successful we end up being, but we're certainly not sitting on our hands. We're very actively developing new tools and shifting our strategies to try and reach the community's goals.
I guess to put it in context, and maybe my thinking is wrong here, but for 13,000 units in data set, of which about 80% are gas, say it cost them $20,000 a piece to switch over. I just switched over to a heat pump, and for heating only, I mean, that's $260 million.
These are the scales, but you also have to take into account, and we are getting a little bit off of what was agendized for tonight. I don't think that's necessarily the focus of tonight's item, but I'm happy to answer questions. The scale of the investment that we're talking about here is large, but you also have to compare that to the scale of just replacing all of this equipment like for like. When you just lay out the cost of a heat pump, but you don't compare it to the cost of replacing your air conditioner in your furnace, which is also, can also get up to $20,000, especially if you're having to rehabilitate your ducts. I mean, I've done work like this in my, in my own home, and the cost can be, there's an incremental cost, but there's an avoided cost as well, that you're not having to replace that air conditioner, you're not having to replace that furnace. And that's exactly what our SCAP funding study is all about. We're looking at the best available regional data and looking at what those costs are and using that to inform our next round of strategies. Okay. So what we're looking at here so this is our estimated equipment population. I think one thing that's really interesting here is that when you look at the percent of equipment that's gas, let's see, I'm looking to see if I have this number, I'll circle back. But, I quoted that 6% number of people who have at least one electric appliance. That was based on people that we knew came through our programs. There's significantly more people who have potentially electric resistance heating and that could benefit from heat pumps, as well as folks who already have gas. All right, next slide.
Jonathan, when you say data set, you mean Palo Alto, right?
This is Palo Alto.
Okay,
yeah.
and my preference would be you say that. Is there anything new, like in the last, since we talked about a lot of these things 30 days ago, was there, what's the news in that last slide?
I'm sorry?
What's the news in that last slide that we didn't know when we talked 30 days ago on this?
I don't think we had these numbers 30 days ago.
We didn't
Yeah.
know what our current.
So so this is to give you
Okay.
some context. And again, nothing that we're hearing tonight is going to change the insights that you had 30 days ago. What instead they're validating. And so again, trying to share this information quickly with the UAC because I think you're very tuned in and I don't think this is going to be in conflict with any of your insights, but it's really important. We wanted to make sure we're coming to the UAC first on this because this is very much within your purview. And also want to be able to share this with the Sustainability Committee, who I think is going to benefit from these insights in ways that the commission will not, because they're not as tuned in with the gas utility. Okay, so the next thing that we did was categorize the different costs and cost drivers that we have within the utility. And the main takeaway here is that over 60% of the costs for the utility year on year decline with declining sales and customer disconnections. So the implication of that is that a 25% reduction in gas sales is not going to result in a 33% increase in gas rates.
I found this incredibly helpful. My only other suggestion is to benchmark it to underlying volatility in that gas rate, because there's a tremendous amount of it, right?
Yes.
And, we've gone back and forth as a commission. Do we hedge? Do we not hedge? What do we do, to kind of even that out? But like the order of magnitude in underlying volatility in bulk gas purchases relative to this increase, I think would help us put this in context.
I think so. One thing that we've done to try to wash out that volatility is to do an annual average. So that's washing out the seasonal variation, but we do see variation year to year to year based on the gas markets. And so we can provide this under a range of circumstances for sure in the final analysis.
I think it makes this look much less scary.
I have one maybe bone to pick with this slide,
Sure.
which is that the general fund transfer isn't just dependent on sales, it's dependent on all the costs because it's a portion of revenue and the revenue is driven by the costs. So as well as by the sales. So while I think,
Yeah, no, that's fair. And there's a complex modeling dynamic there. And I think as we we develop the final report, I think we can integrate that better than it's integrated here. So I'm gonna
And-
take that comment.
I also think it's 18%, right?
So what we have here is just based on straight numbers. And so I have to think through how the percentages work. When you're looking at the transfer as a percentage of all costs, as opposed to what is the percentage transfer on all the other costs, all the other non-transfer costs, the percentages change. So I don't think I can do that math off the top of my head here, but that's what's going on there.
Right. I wasn't talking about that part of the math. I was talking about, isn't what is the transfer supposed to be 18% of
But yes, the
revenue?
number is 18%. That 18% won't show up on this chart, but yes, that's the number.
Okay, thank you.
Megan, you expressed, you were pleased by the chart. I personally couldn't interpret the chart on its own. That probably says more about me than the chart. But for example, I saw the 60%. That seemed to be the key takeaway. I couldn't figure out which 60% are part of that, let's call it fixed cost or, death spiral vulnerable costs. Was it blue? Was it gray? Obviously overhead seems fixed, but I mean, I couldn't interpret the chart or the colors on my own, sorry. So if you're passing this on to other audiences, you might consider that.
Point is taken. Would you like me to take you through it though?
Sure.
Okay. So all the blue,
Am I the only one?
Let him take it through. Let's go.
all the blue, those are costs that decrease based on declining sales. Yeah. The orange is based on the number of customers. And so that is less variable, but as customers disconnect, you do see cost decreases. And then in the gray, these are costs that you could imagine seeing decreases as the gas mains are abandoned.
So 40% of our cost roughly looks like it's fixed, and therefore
Right.
those left holding the bag as users abandon and drop off,
Right.
that number gets no smaller.
But because it's 40%, the implication here is that if you have a 25% reduction in gas use, that does not mean a 25% or 33% if you're working the percentages increase in gas rates. It means about a 10% increase in gas rates. So if sales decrease, if sales decrease to about 75% of what they are now, you're seeing costs decrease to about 85%.
I get that in concept. If this is going to other committees or council or what you might spell out that concept in a separate slide.
Thank you. No, that's helpful. Next slide, please. Okay, and then this is the last insight, and we got a great comment from Commissioner Metz, who I know can't be here tonight, about the 80% scenario, and I'll come to that in a minute. Essentially what this shows is that you have to electrify a lot before you start being able to abandon gas mains. And that is assuming, as we assumed in the simulations, that electrification is random. And we may find as we get more and more people electrifying that there's clustering that starts to happen, and that'll be something that we learn about. Right now, I don't think we have enough information to expect clustering necessarily. And if it is just purely random, you need to get down to 60% reductions before you're starting to see even 10% of the mains able to be abandoned. And this is frankly, potentially a conservative number because we haven't pulled these simulations out and looked to see whether there are individual mains that are just sitting abandoned, sitting without any connections based on this simulation. You need to actually put it into the gas model and see, does this actually even maintain flow? And so the implication here is that there's going to have to be some sort of provision or understanding for how to manage gas rates through almost the entire course of electrification as it goes, and their electrification as the community transitions. And I think there are a lot of different strategies that we'll try and talk about over the year. Commissioner Phillips mentioned, even the idea of trying to combine these costs into the broader PG&E gas system costs through some kind of a sale or arrangement. So we don't have the answers on how to deal with that right now, but that is partially what we're looking at in the SCAP funding study. And as we make progress on this study, we will, we'll be coming back to you. There was a great comment from Commissioner Metz about the 80% reductions. This is meant to be a bookend scenario. It's illustrating that about 85% of the mains could be abandoned if you could get all the small, medium businesses and the residents to disconnect. But he also makes the point that you could easily reach 80% gas sales reductions without being able to disconnect a lot of mains. And so I think it's good for us to have an 80% bookend scenario and also an 80% fully random scenario. And so we'll incorporate that into the final study as well. Next slide. All right, so this is just the next steps, and I won't dive into these in detail, but happy to talk about them if you have any questions. Go ahead.
Jonathan, thank you again. Always really nice to see your progress on this, and sometimes seeing it 30 days later is great. I have two just quick, tiny thoughts. The first is that this may be an opportunity to interface with Catherine and other comms people, but I think that the word abandonment is maybe not, it's not clear whether we are abandoning customers or whether the customers are abandoning us.
Thank you.
And so I think we need to be very clear when we use the word abandonment. It means that customers have voluntarily disconnected from their gas line in the context of your study. Right.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for that clarification. This was something that I wanted to make sure I said up front and missed the opportunity to, that this is, so that point about abandonment is well taken, that these are mains that people have chosen to disconnect from. This is not a plan to withdraw gas. This is a study to try and understand the potential effects on the gas system from electrification that the community is pursuing. I think, as you start to dig deeper and deeper and deeper into electrification, as we, if we're able to make really, really strong progress, then, there are a lot of potential impacts that need to be mitigated, but this is not setting out a plan to withdraw gas. We're very focused on trying to promote voluntary electrification right now.
What's your belief on the timing to get to 20% or 40%? I'm not even asking about 60 and 80.
Yeah, no, it depends really heavily on whether we're able to crack the formula that really helps, that really makes it simple for people to get across, makes it really simple for people to pursue electrification on their own. And we have a number of concepts we're trying out through 2026 and 2027. And then there are also air district regulations that are coming into effect over the next several years that may also help move the community, help move the Bay Area toward some of these higher levels of electrification penetration.
I have a couple of questions and then kind of a comment. One question is on the commercial and on the industrial side, do we have anybody who's using natural gas as a feedstock, or is it being used for energy by everybody?
This is one of the reasons that so I don't know the answer to that question. It's distinctly possible with the penetration of life sciences, with life sciences companies in Palo Alto that it is being used that way. And that's why we stayed away from assuming reductions in the medical and industrial sectors, because we just don't have a good handle on some of the gas uses in those areas.
Because of course, if they're using it as feedstock, it's very hard to get them to withdraw from the system. The second is, I think, that when you did the simulation, you probably assumed independence of people disconnecting from gas, geographic independence. I suspect that that's may not be the case, because I think geographies in the city that are more affluent, the people are more likely to disconnect because of the cost of disconnection. This is something you could look at empirically. I think with the disconnections you've seen, it might ease the transition a little bit, and then, the final comment is,
Can you just restate that? I just want to make sure I understood. You're thinking the more affluent, they can afford to disconnect?
yes,
Does the technology work for really large homes? And because that's what the affluent parts of Palo Alto have. So if you have a 5,000 square foot home, does it actually work properly? Because people have told me it doesn't.
I think we are going to have some very large homes that'll have more complicated systems, but I think going to Commissioner Phillips' comment, I think there are areas of town where you may have people in mid-size, 3,000, 4,000, larger 3,000, 4,000 square foot homes. These are homes that can be fully electrified using common technologies, but that there may be clusters of homes that are, where in areas of town that are maybe a little bit more affluent, where people can afford to disconnect, where there might be some clustering. And this is definitely one of the underlying assumptions that this is definitely one thing that we haven't worked into the study, and I'm not sure that we'll be able to, is trying to predict where people will electrify. But it's true. If we do see some clustering, then we're going to be able to see some, then that will have some benefits for
it
this,
helps you.
for this, this process.
And then the final one is I do want to take, again, we're not in the brainstorming phase, but I do think there's no way I can think of that this can happen in terms of going down 80% reduction without driving enormous rate increases. And, we're already next to probably the smallest gas utility in the state of California. We're going to keep getting smaller and smaller. I do want us to explore the option of, combining somehow with PG&E, whether through a sale of the utility, of the gas utility alone. Right now, our gas rates, as I understand it, have been slightly lower, kind of on par with PG&E, although we suffered during the big gas spike, relative to them. As this continues, our rates may go substantially higher than PG&E. So for both our customers, there would be the benefit of lower rates potentially, and for PG&E, there would be the benefit of, more customers and more revenue.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of different considerations to balance there. And I think, anytime you think that you might be able to offload a pile of risk onto another entity, they usually find a way to make you pay for it one way or another.
Yeah, but this is not risk, right? This is not risk. This is our customers that would provide, revenue and profit to PG&E.
So, first off, I just want to say, I think that option, along with every other option, needs to be on the table. But, anytime the risk is the risk of stranded assets, and that's the risk that you're trying to put on the other entity, and they usually find a way to make you pay for that. The other thing I'll say is that if you can't figure out a way for one isolated part of the gas system to gracefully shrink, then you have a similar challenge at the state level, and they're going through planning processes right now. And so if there isn't a way to do it, I mean, certainly it could be easier if you're able to offload that risk, but if there isn't a way to do it, and one of the things that Palo Alto has been trying to do is try and set an example. If there isn't a way to do it, and I believe there is, then there isn't a way to do it, you know, in California. And I think that the planners do believe that there is a way to gracefully shrink the gas system.
Sure, but, and we don't need to debate it now.
Yeah.
But I think, given that the rest of California is undoubtedly at a much longer glide path than we are, there is benefit and to having different small systems, having a bunch of independent small systems, each trying to manage its own decline makes no sense whatsoever with the way rates are being done. Putting together a larger system, you know, drags it out and makes it easier potentially. But anyway,
I think the
debate it here.
takeaway is that it's something that, you know, needs to be looked at and explored as a solution.
Sure.
I'd agree with that, but can I just clarify that right now that would save us about 7% of the overhead costs in like assuming that there were no additional overhead costs if we were to turn it over to PG&E.
I have no outlook on what it would
Okay,
or
but you
wouldn't
have
save.
7%. You list overhead costs in this table that you provided as a set of assumptions.
Can we go back 2 slides?
Sure. But everything else is, I mean, you have the general fund transfers, you save that.
Can I
Not
just
necessarily.
clarify for the commission? The gas transition study, as staff has mentioned, is just a study and evaluation of what that looks
Absolutely.
like. It was not contemplating for the public a sale of the gas utility.
Absolutely.
Of those, I appreciate the kind of the brainstorming and association with that, but I just wanted to provide as clarity so that the words that we're using in terms of looking at a transition, looking at people switching and electrifying in terms of the city's commitment and interest to continue with the gas utility.
Thank you.
Greg, unless you want to say something?
No, I'm good.
This is perhaps more a question for the dais, but I have to ask how this topic is on the agenda tonight. It's just a month ago that we broached it, I think for the first time at UAC in detail. It is not on finance or council agenda for the rest of the year, as far as I can tell. Specifically, it's no doubt super important. I don't question that. But with all the things that we have to talk about and with just the 30 days that have passed, I'd love to understand how the agenda decision was made.
I'm happy to answer that question. When we had our planning meeting, we shared that same question to staff as to how it was that we were seeing this just 30 days later. But it was shared with us that because this was going to go to SCAP and that this was distinct from the content that we covered 30 days ago, that nobody wanted the UAC to feel excluded from having been given the opportunity to see what was going to be shared with SCAP before coming to the UAC.
The other thing that I've seen is that involving the UAC through these studies has produced better results. It's great to have your feedback as we make progress on the study. I always get something valuable when I come to meet with you mid-study.
Well, thank you very much.
And I have to say, I very much appreciated getting this update. I mean, just seeing those numbers on the fraction of households, I mean, I had no idea if we were 80%, over 80% gas in those categories. That to me was a huge surprise. Maybe it shouldn't have been. And also seeing which followed my intuition, but still seeing we have to get up to 60 to 80% before we really start seeing any significant ability to close mains was great. So I for one, appreciate it.
We do have to remember that these numbers that we're looking at in that chart, Bob, also the 6% or the 10% of homes that have a major electric appliance. That doesn't mean we turn our gas off. I mean, everyone knows that. You can get an oven, you can get a heat pump or an HVAC system or a water heater, but unless it's all or nothing, then the customer has not abandoned gas. So the volume will go down, but that customer hookup, that block still needs to be delivered or not. They may hold out or refuse to abandon us, I guess is the right word. Sorry.
No,
But there are
you're
also,
spot on, and this is validating that insight.
but there were also a number of questions that came up at our last meeting that I hope won't get forgotten. They were everything from how does this sync up with grid mod? Because of course, the whole point, I imagine, from an SCAP point of view is that, as people get off gas, the grid has to be ready to support them. I mean, that's one way to, I guess, frame it. These do need to be in sync. I assume that's the whole point. But at the last meeting, it was said that, no, this is a gas study. We're doing an electric study that's separate. And I got the impression that maybe that connection isn't as coordinated as it should be. I'm sure SCAP is coordinating it, so I probably shouldn't say that. But, we talked about the need to model and predict and forecast the number of homes that will cut the gas off, how that will maybe or not lead to a block by block plan, whether we have a core gas network and can define it. Last month, we could not define what the core gas network was or draw it on a map as I understood us. What other cities are doing and best practices, because a simple, Google query will let you know that there are tons of cities, Switzerland, but you don't have to go to Switzerland. I mean, America, that are pushing and probing and trying to decommission or transition off gas. So Palo Alto may in some ways be a pioneer, but there are a lot of towns that, by my research, are doing this and we can probably learn from. So all those questions have come up just a month ago, and I hope they don't get forgotten.
Thank you. No, we are incorporating all the comments from last month into the study plan.
Go ahead.
Can I ask one last question? Jonathan, I think this is probably a question that is more appropriate for SCAP than the UAC, but I don't have a great understanding of how fugitive emissions are likely to change as gas usage declines on a relative basis, and thus like what the actual climate benefit is of the transition. I think it would be just helpful to benchmark that if at all possible, or include that as part of the study.
Yeah, we do estimate fugitive emissions as part of our,
Okay, great.
it's relatively small, but there have been past discussions with with other UACs about upstream emissions, even beyond Palo Alto's gas system. We just look at Palo Alto's gas system. It's relatively small compared to the emissions of the actual primary combustion, but we can bring that.
I don't even need you to bring it. I just, something to flag maybe for, mention that is being included when you go to SCAP.
Can do.
All right, Jonathan, is there anything more or?
Nope, that's it. Thank you
All
for your
right, any other
questions and your
questions or not?
feedback.
Great. Thank you very much, Jonathan. And I actually really appreciate you coming to UAC on this too. All right, next item.
Thanks. So next item is a discussion on implementation plan for voluntary residential electric service time of use rates. So I'm going to call Catherine Elvert. She's our communication manager. So I just wanted to get a little guidance and request from the UAC. So Catherine has put this presentation. It is a little more interactive, so she will be pausing during the presentation for some questions and answers. So my request is that we hold some of the questions till the end, and there'll be some pauses for you to provide some input. There's I think 14 slides in total, a lot of them photos and pictures. So I know that you'll have a lot of interest on it. So I just want to try to make that ask initially. Ms. Elvert.
Apologies, Kaylee Burton, Utilities Administrative Assistant. Can we go back to item number 2 and take public comment?
Oh, yes.
All
That's
right.
my bad.
Was there any request for public comment? I don't know if we had one for item 1 as well.
We can check for 1. If any member of the public would like to speak on item number 1 or item number 2, please raise your hand or press star 9 now. No hands raised.
Good evening, Commissioners. Catherine Elbert, Communications Manager for the City of Palo Alto Utilities Department. It's a pleasure to be with you here again. And we are here to discuss, of course, our time of use implementation and communication plan. I'm going to have Kaylee advance the slides for me. So Kaylee, please, our first slide. So just a quick overview of where we are in terms of timing for our time of use rollout. Tonight, we are here for review and discussion with the commissioners and seeking your feedback on our planned phased enrollment, also our draft communication plan and our draft communication materials. Next slide. And a refresher about time of use pricing, just for those who may not be familiar with it, is, and why we offer time of use is because it provides several benefits for both customers and the broader energy system as a whole. If we can encourage customers to shift their electricity usage to certain times of the day when energy sources are cleaner, customers can save money on their electric bills and reduce their environmental impact. And it also helps the utilities reduce peak demand, alleviates stress on the grid, reduces grid emissions, and improves overall system reliability. Next slide, Kaylee. So our phased enrollment plan includes initiating a small-scale testing program for a smooth rollout. We did a lot of research to find out what other utilities have done when they decided to offer a voluntary time of use rate. We wanted to make sure they were following best practices. So in January, we will begin with a small phased enrollment of about 10 customers per month for the first quarter of 2026. These customers may include those who are interested and active, such as commissioners like yourselves, city council members, perhaps City of Palo Alto Utilities employees who live in Palo Alto. We will be communicating directly with those customers. And if our testing proves accurate and we see positive customer feedback, then we will plan to open up the enrollment to up to 50 customers per month with a full enrollment period around July 2026. Let me just also tell you that our current estimate for the total number of customer enrollments for the first year, once we begin offering TOU for all of our customers, is around 100 to 500 customers. And this is again based on the research that we have done, based on what other public utilities have seen in terms of uptake when they've offered a voluntary rate. I do have detailed numbers in a later slide on how we arrived at this estimate, if you're interested in seeing that. Next slide. So our communication and marketing plan goal is to, of course, increase opt-in participation by providing information of the new TOU rate offering following the phased enrollment. That's going to be important for us to verify the data through the test period. Through our messaging, we want to clearly communicate the program rules, how customers can realize cost savings by adjusting their energy use, provide customers with tools and information to help them make informed choices. And our intent is to educate all customers about the environmental benefits of consuming electricity during the 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. solar production periods, rather than during the 4 to 9 p.m. peak period, even if they're not on the time of use rate. And this is for environmental benefits. In attachment A of your staff report, you can find a detailed description of the customer communication plan. Next slide, please. Our outreach efforts will utilize a variety of channels, including traditional, digital, and media engagement. I will share more details on this in a later slide. Our goal is to maximize our outreach, leveraging these different methods. And we will also engage in targeted outreach to those customers who we think may benefit the most from being on the TOU rate. And that is those who are higher energy users, those who live in all electric homes, those who drive electric vehicles. We recognize how important it is for us to monitor customer satisfaction through feedback surveys. And we do have a timeline provided for you in attachment A of your staff report for when we plan to engage in these various outreach efforts. We have begun some work already. I will show you some examples in a later slide. Here are some visuals here, but we'll discuss further. Next slide. An important resource to help our customers understand the new TOU rate offering and the benefits of shifting their energy use away from peak hours is, of course, through compilation of frequently asked questions. We have developed a list of initial FAQs also in your staff report. These thoughtful FAQs will allow customers to effectively find answers to their questions via the city's website, and it will help us alleviate demands on our customer service staff. We did look at examples of what other jurisdictions had pulled together for their FAQs to help guide what we have drafted so far. So we've done some dedicated research with other utilities and looked at what other industry partners recommend, such as through the American Public Power Association. We will add to and continue to evolve these FAQs as the program moves on and as we roll through the implementation. Next slide. Through looking at lessons from other utility case studies, we've learned that tailored messaging boosts enrollment. Our messaging should be direct, simple, and focused on personal, financial, and environmental impacts. How can customers save? How much can they save in terms of dollars and carbon reductions by shifting their time of use? And customer service will be available to provide personalized analysis for customers using a rate calculator tool. Eventually, we hope to enable that through our MyCPAU utility online account management portal. Next slide. Here are just a few visuals showing the rate schedules and time periods to help communicate savings potentials. This is for the summer season. Customers can do their own rate analysis. They can look at their billing information through MyCPAU, but customer service is also available to provide those personalized analyses. I do have more details on these estimated customer financials and carbon savings on a separate slide. And just to help set those expectations for what we anticipate customers will see once we offer the TOU. So we can go through that a little bit later. And then next slide. This is just the winter season. The previous slide was showing you for the summer season. Next slide. Okay, through our research about what other utilities have done and what they've developed for messaging and graphic design, we have found that there are a few different types of messaging approaches that we can utilize, and we'd like to explore what those are. So we're sharing some examples from other utilities. What you're seeing here on the left is from Sioux Valley Energy, and on the right from Jackson Electric Membership Corporation. The focus in this messaging is on cost savings. Next slide. From our friends at Southern California Edison, they provide clear graphics and charts to show what time of day is super off-peak, peak, and when it is ideal to use energy. They're also demonstrating savings for specific applications, such as high energy using appliances. Next slide. From our friends at Sacramento Municipal Utility District, they are clearly communicating a call to action on when to reduce energy use. They also show the high energy using appliances that customers can power off or use at different times of the day to increase their savings, and then also some charts showing the different rate schedules at varying times. Next slide. Now, we have developed some sample bill inserts, which are available in your packet, so don't try to read this small text. This can give you a sense of the look and feel of what is possible for us to offer in Palo Alto. So these are just initial drafts of potential messages and graphic design. And here you see 3 different approaches or themes. The first one is educational. The second is behavioral change. The third is money saving. We can test the success of response to different messaging approaches and repurpose messaging across these outreach channels through print, digital, direct, and dynamic platforms. This outreach material is designed to convey to the customers what the benefits are as an incentive for them to opt in to the TOU rate. And now this brings us to the opportunity for us to discuss and gather feedback from commissioners on our planned communication strategy, keeping in mind the materials that are in your staff report, such as the list of the outreach venues, the timeline for our outreach activities, the samples of some of our draft outreach messages in these bill inserts and other channels. And we'd like to know, is there anything else that the commissioners would like to see? What resonates with you? And I'm going to go ahead and open it up for discussion.
had a couple of thoughts on, in terms of feedback on these. I think that the idea of testing them is really helpful. I will say on the first one with the appliance pictures, I had a somewhat challenging time understanding what the laundry machine was. Maybe that reflects the fact that I don't do laundry in my household, but I think that moving towards diagrams instead of actual pictures, unlike the SCE examples, was more simple and perhaps visually impactful. I think that surely you've thought a lot about this third one in terms of hitting the sweet spot for lower energy costs. But I think if you don't benchmark it to what current rates are, the opportunity doesn't pop out. In fact, it just looks like you're at risk of being charged a lot more during those peak hours. So to me, that did not resonate strongly when I looked at it. And perhaps the third bottom box, instead of can shift major electricity use to 9 to 3, it's really getting it out to 4 to 9 that matters. So I think that the message there could be valuably inverted.
That's very good feedback. Thank you.
I have positive things to say. I thought you did a great job, Catherine, and I think it looks great, and you answered my questions, and I feel it'll probably be successful.
Thank you.
I have positive things to say as well. First off, I can't help but ask about FAQ number 7, which I think says, if Palo Alto is already carbon neutral, then how does time of use reduce our greenhouse gas? That's actually a question for Alan that he does not need to answer. It just refers to our back and forth earlier. And whenever whenever the topic is time of use, I'll repeat what I've said in previous meetings, which is I do wish we could go bigger. I do wish that the price differential, and 33 to 17, I think it is that's a nice 2x difference. But I would just keep, in all of our modeling and scenario planning and so forth, I do wish we could make that differential bigger. And I wish that we could make it faster. 10 customers per month is, it's enough to generate a 100-person sample size, but like some of the council or finance committee people who looked at this, I would love to see us move faster. And I know, of course, we can turn up the volume as the months go. I'll point out again the point that NEM is not, solar customers are not your targets. So I think most of us are here on the dais are solar or mini, and we're disqualified from starting. If you're NEM 1, it sounds like we'll never be TOU qualified because of our billing system. And that's something, the billing system is something we probably need to have on the agenda sooner or later. Doesn't that sound nitty gritty and fun? Another small point in the time chart, that 3 to 4 slot seems problematic. It's like you're in super low, you're super off peak, and then there's a 1 hour 3 to 4 where you're normal, and then you're in peak. And I'm sure we've modeled that and made all kinds of assumptions, but I think consumer behavior is going to trip over the fact that it's like this one little wedge of light green on the bar chart. Do you know what I mean? Okay, so you don't have to answer that. It's just bound to be, as so many people cut something out and put it on the refrigerator to remember the hours, and this is just going to be something they trip over. As far as the creative itself, the last thing you want, I imagine, is graphic input from the dais, but avoid small print just as a rule. Earlier in tonight's meeting, there was discussion about set your dishwasher to start at 10 o'clock, or do your laundry at a different hour, or obviously charge your EV not between 4 and 9. I would think of marketing messaging that actually bullets those those specific actions out, it's probably going to have more impact than asking Megan to figure out what that dishwasher icon means. But everyone will understand if you do this, that, and the other thing, you might save costs. And I think I'll leave it at that unless you want my judgment on the color palettes. Just kidding.
So piggyback on what Chris said, are there certain things that are more impactful than others? It's like running a dishwasher versus charging your EV. I assume charging your EV is much more impactful, right?
Charging your EV is the most impactful.
That's what I figured. That's why I said it. So I guess it might be nice to know what really you should do versus use no electricity at all.
How
Like,
about this one? Buy a battery. Buy a battery and charge it, off peak.
so, I mean, it's a good question. It'd be nice for people to know if that actually saves you money or if it doesn't save you money. Because, I don't know what the cost of the battery is and all that. And it's, but does it actually save you money? And then someone else made a comment about having bigger differentials. I just assumed the rates you chose are based, frankly, on the cost to serve, because I would assume that the law requires that. So you don't really have a choice. Like, if you do time of use rates, you have to do it based on the cost to serve, and you can't just say, we're going to charge 80 cents for, doing it from 3 to 9. But I thought I'd raise that and just get confirmation if I'm right, or Greg, no, you're totally wrong.
You're exactly right. I don't know if you need to know the details, but we did
No,
do
I don't need
a
the
separate
details. I
study
just
on
wanted to know
that to
that.
determine what those rates could be and those operational windows. And, there is a balance though, Commissioner Tucker, and do you make them a 2-step or 3-step? And there was a strong discussions internally on what that would best look like. And in terms of, do you just have one low rate and a higher, or do you have kind of this low, medium, high in terms of TOU rates? It's not a communication piece, but
I followed
hear
the
you.
logic of 3 different tiers.
Yeah.
I simply was pointing out that strange 3 p.m., 4 p.m. where it goes to the peak, but not super. Anyway, 3 to 4 is just a weird extra time
Understood.
zone. It's a
I guess
fourth
that didn't
central.
bother me that much because I think people won't get really hurt if they use the 3 to 4, right? I mean, it's still cheaper, I think, than using, the regular rates, right? It's 20 cents on the regular and it's 18 on the 3 to 4, so you're still better off.
And we do appreciate the look and feel. I mean, the whole point of this conversation is what will resonate with the community, what will resonate with you as not residents and customers in terms of what you and your neighbors would like to see in terms of what information is relevant and pertinent and valuable. So the color palette is the city standard though, so.
On that note, I did observe that all of the marketing from our own drafts to other companies, none of them actually finish the sentence as to why you should, why you should shift your usage. And maybe it goes without saying, but I kept thinking, do people know that the reason power will be cheap at 2 p.m. is that solar and wind, but really solar makes it so abundant that we can't even give it away. I'm exaggerating, but the point is, I wonder whether the messaging would benefit from completing that thought. Move your EV charging to this lot because that's when solar makes power. That's when the sun is shining. Just the obvious statement, but again, maybe it seems to be that all these marketing people that built these messagings think that goes without saying.
I think the challenge is that it's a combination of generation and grid congestion. And so the sun is still shining from 4, sometimes until 9.
Yeah.
But you have tremendous congestion on the grid. And that is why following the sun is not good marketing guidance.
Not enough, yeah. The sun is shining and the grid is free or unclogged.
I do think that is a very good point, Commissioner Tucker. And that is a point that Commissioner Croft had made as well, that we wanted to focus in our marketing messaging on the solar production hours being the most beneficial for customers to use energy during that super off-peak period. So we will be massaging the messaging content for sure. What you see here is by no means a final version of what we'll be putting out to our customers. It was just an initial draft based on some of the research we did from other utilities. But we do want to be able to emphasize the reasons why we are encouraging customers to shift their electricity use. It really is for environmental reasons. So that's a very good point. Thank you. We'll complete the sentence.
A couple of points. One, something you mentioned, but I didn't see is communicating to people, even if they don't get time of use rates, what would be 3 useful things to do? Would just have a flyer to say, charge your electric vehicle during the day. I mean, yeah, forget the 3 to 4 issue, but when the sun is shining, that's when you want to charge, or when you want to charge the batteries. Just communicating that, I think, would be interesting in comparing the behavior shift. I know other cities have tried it and I've seen some behavior shift. The second point is, I think it's going to be, quite frankly, a long time before we learn much. I mean, it sounds like we're going to learn a lot, but we're only going to have 10 people come in a month. People with solar are not available. The difference on a typical bill is $37 a year compared to $1,200. It's not, it's just not going to give us all that much useful information, except that we've done things right. Are we getting people to sign up for 6 months or a year? What's the minimum
6 months.
6 months.
And then they have the opportunity to opt out and switch back to the E1 rate if they're interested.
Right. So, again, I think it's kind of it's something we need to offer in the long term, but I think this is more kind of dipping our toe in and to expect very much from it. I think there certainly will be insights, but I don't want to get myself too excited. I love the idea of time of use rates. I'm a longtime advocate of it, but when I kind of look at this program, look at the fact it's not those huge differentials, the impact on typical bill will be small, 10 people a month. It's, I don't know, it'll be great to see it work, but I'm not going to be, pounding the table how's it going every 5 months.
But that reminds me of a question that's come up in prior meetings, that now that we have AMI rollout at 90-something%, are we now starting to do the analytics to build usage patterns, to model how people across all Palo Alto, or maybe in sub cohorts, how they are using, when they are using power, and to see how those curves are today, and then how they change with 10 new users or 100 new users, as if those who switch to TOU. That question's come up, and just a reminder that those analytics will be crucial. Are we set up for that?
Thank you for that question. Yes, the whole goal, one of the goals with the AMA rollout is be able to mine that data in terms of the customer usage. And as we mentioned, we've seen, and we're learning from other agencies like Sacramento Municipal Utility District in terms of how they mine their data, the customer usage, how that changes over time, and they're able to kind of present that data to their governing board. And so that information and that kind of process, and again, they're much larger than we are. I did want to mention that, AMI rollout and TOU rates from other agencies there is a lag time between it. We're actually going a little bit ahead in reference to other agencies because we don't have maybe the full data set. But as we do this AMI rollout, the customers, as we go through the 50 or 100 that we're going through, they're going to be able to call in to our customer service reps and billing, and they'll be able to run that analysis. Does it make sense for you to move over to a TOU rates? And we'll do that as that process so that the customer understands, will they be saving money? Does this make sense? So wanted just to kind of to mention that as well. So in context, we'll be working with those customers, getting their feedback, and then finding out what works. I did also want to mention some of the history and learning from others is there are customers that are on what we call NEM 1 for solar. And what we're finding and working in FAQs from other entities is that those are the customers who actually don't move over. And part of that reason is the way the time of use rates work. since solar production is primarily during the day, when they feed back into the grid, they're feeding back at a lower rate, right? So it doesn't really make economic sense for them, and that's just how TOU
They're feeding
rates
back at a
work.
higher rate.
They're feeding it back in a lower rate during the day.
Price or dollar rate or?
A kilowatt hour
Oh,
rates,
okay.
right? So if you go to a time of use rates, you'll be producing solar at your home and then putting it back in the grid at a lower rate. So that's what we've seen from from several investor-owned utilities and public-owned
I
utilities.
agree
So-
with your point. Yeah, if you're a solar customer of any kind, certainly if you have a battery, certainly if you're M1 versus M2, you're going to benefit less. You're going to be less compelled by the time of use deal.
Correct.
All things equal, but there's also winter, and a lot of big solar households pay nothing for power all summer long, but then in November, December, this time of use differential will, be attractive. There's no reason not to take it, I guess, except for our billing system. And so the faster we can get any and all solar households qualified, obviously the better. Your prior point was,
Point well taken.
I'm sorry, what was your first point that just now? I'm drawing
Just
a blank.
the AMI rollout in terms of
right. Yeah, I
having that
just did one-
data and mining it and such that we can have,
Thank you.
that intelligence that did come up in previous discussions with the UAC in terms of not only saving for the customers, but saving for the utility in terms of, purchasing power as a utility at a higher rate. If our customers save, then the utility saves as well. So sending those signals such that that the city benefits, the customer benefits, those are good conversations and good metrics. Thank you.
Let's go to the public.
If any member of the public would like to speak on item number 3, please raise your hand or press star 9 now. No hands raised.
Let's go on to the next item.
So the fourth item, as I mentioned, is for action. It's the reaffirmation of the carbon neutral plan and renewable energy credit exchange program. So I believe that's Jim Stack who will be giving that presentation.
Yep. Good evening, commissioners. Again, Jim Stack here, Senior Resource Planner. So just wanted to give you guys all an update on the REC Exchange program. That's the Renewable Energy Credit Exchange program and our carbon neutral plan. So just as background, we've had a carbon neutral plan in place since 2013. When we adopted that program, when council adopted that program back then, 12 years ago, we used an annual standard of accounting, which meant that as long as our annual supplies of carbon neutral generation were at the same level as or greater than our annual load, we consider ourselves carbon neutral. And at the time, the duck curve was not very prominent, so emissions didn't vary too drastically over the course of the day or over the course of the year. And as you can see in the lower left curve over time, as more solar has been interconnected on the grid, the duck curve has become more and more pronounced, such that in the middle of the day when the sun is out, especially in the milder months of the year, like the spring and the fall, the grid is quite clean. The electricity on the grid has very low emissions intensity. And then in the evening when the sun goes down, gas generation has to come online and the grid becomes much dirtier. So over time, this started to become more apparent. And in 2020, council adopted an update after the UAC recommended it to switch from an annual accounting standard to an hourly accounting standard. So we held ourselves to a more strict, more rigorous standard for accounting for the carbon neutral plan, where we look at our every hour of the year, we look at how much load we have and how much carbon neutral generation we have, and then to the extent that there's a discrepancy there, whatever surplus or deficit position we have in each hour, we weight that by the average emissions intensity of grid power during that hour. So we're accounting for the fact that the grid is cleaner during periods when we have lots of solar in our portfolio and less clean during the evening hours. At the same time, in 2020, when Council adopted that carbon neutral plan update, they adopted the REC exchange program. And that is the program where we sell some of our surplus in-state renewables, also known as bucket one RECs, and we exchange them on a one-for-one basis for out-of-state renewables. And so from our perspective, there's no climate impact associated with this exchange. It's just renewable energy for renewable energy. And but because of the way the state structures the RPS requirements, and it gives preferential treatment to in-state renewables, there's a large price differential between in-state and out-of-state renewables. When Council adopted that program in 2020, they directed us to allocate most of that revenue in 2020 and 2021 towards simply offsetting supply costs and trying to hold rate increases down. And then allocating 1/3 of that revenue, that net revenue, towards local decarbonization efforts. And then we came back in 2022 at Council's direction for a review of the program up to that point and the results. At that point, Council reauthorized the program and directed that all of the revenue, the net revenue associated with the REC exchange program, be allocated towards our local decarbonization efforts. And they also directed us to come back in 2025 for an additional review of the program and to go over the results and reauthorize the program. So that's what the purpose of the presentation is tonight. So looking at the first 6 years of the REC exchange program results, you can see here in this table that for the first few years, the program drew in about roughly $2 million per year in net revenue, which was roughly in line with expectations when we adopted the program in 2020. Back at the time that we adopted the program, bucket one REC prices were around $15 to $20 per REC, and bucket three prices were around $5. So a relatively small gap between those two, or kind of arbitrage opportunity. What we saw then in 2023, and in particular in 2024, is the price of in-state renewables, or bucket one RECs, just skyrocketed. It went from about $15 or $20 up to about $75 or even $80 per REC at one point. And so that meant, and the price of bucket three RECs really didn't change at all. So what that meant was that our net revenue for this program really soared, and you can see that we drew in about $18.5 million over the course of those 2 years. Starting this year, the price of bucket one RECs has come back to roughly where it was again. It's roughly in the $18 range now. So for this year, our revenue is down to about $3.5 million. And so altogether, that results in $28.5 million or so of net revenue from the program over the course of these 6 years. And only about $3.5 million of that has been allocated towards offsetting supply costs, and the remainder has been essentially set aside for use towards funding electrification efforts for local decarbonization purposes through the SCAP. The actual mechanism here is that we set aside revenue from sales of our carbon allowances that we receive from the state, and a portion of those revenues that we receive from carbon allowance sales gets put into the cap and trade reserve and is kind of earmarked for decarbonization programs. One sort of quirk that we weren't anticipating when we adopted the program is that in 2023 and 2024, the net revenue from the REC exchange program greatly exceeded the amount of revenue we received from all of our carbon allowance sales, which is usually around in the order of about $5 million per year. And so we need to come up with a plan and discuss internally how to handle this sort of situation, which wasn't anticipated when we adopted the program or set up the rules for it. So we're planning to discuss that and come back to you with a recommendation in a future meeting. But for now, my understanding from speaking with Jonathan is that The funding for SCAP initiatives like electrification has come primarily from other sources up to this point, like public benefits funds, low carbon fuel standard credit sales, and gas cap and trade allowance sales. So for now, these funds have been sort of set aside for future use in electrification. Looking towards the future, our projections for the next 5 years is the program will bring in on the order of about $2 million per year in net revenue if it's continued. Most of that comes in the first 3 years, 2026 through 2028. After that point, the opportunity to bring in additional revenue starts to drop off quite rapidly, and that's due to the fact that our RPS requirement level increases year over year until we get to 60% in 2030. And so the amount of excess kind of in-state renewables we have diminishes over time as that requirement ratchets up. And secondary factors are the fact that our load is increasing and some of our older power purchase agreements are starting to expire. So that also, those two factors also reduce the amount of the volume of RECs we have that can be exchanged. Although I should add that if we do sign additional PPAs for in-state renewables, which we're working on currently, that would help to increase the amount of RECs we have available to exchange. But yeah, essentially around $2 million per year is our current projection based on our current REC forecast and our current supply portfolio conditions. Now, one additional wrinkle associated with this program is that it does have an impact on our power content label that we mail out in the fall every year. And that's because in addition to having the state in the RPS rules kind of advantaging in-state renewables, they also do the same on the power content label rules. And so the state, for the power content label purposes, considers out-of-state renewables to be essentially equivalent to grid power. They call it unspecified power. And they assign it an emissions intensity about the equivalent of a relatively dirty gas generation plant. And so that means when we are selling some of our in-state resources and replacing them with out-of-state RECs, our portfolio looks like it has more market power in it. And the carbon intensity associated with the portfolio also goes up. So for 2025, the bars on the left represent our portfolio without the REC exchanges. And that has a carbon intensity of 45 pounds of CO2 per megawatt hour. And then with the REC exchanges that we have already done for 2025, the portfolio looks like the bars on the right with more market power, unspecified power, and a carbon intensity of about 159 pounds per megawatt hour, which is still roughly half as dirty as the statewide average for all utilities in California. So at this point, we are recommending a motion to kind of continue with the status quo with the carbon neutral plan as it is and with the REC exchange program as it is as well, and to again return in a few years for another subsequent review of the program. So with that, I can take any questions you have.
So the decrease in revenue is not due to bucket one, bucket three prices converging, but more to our portfolio resource RPS level increasing?
Yes, that's correct.
You see those, you think that will stay the same differential, same more
or
or
less,
the
yeah.
forecast?
Yeah, we anticipate bucket one prices maintaining their value and bucket three prices increasing slightly, but pretty minimally. Yeah.
I mean, that seems to me to be have no downside. So I mean, yes, I would certainly support continuing it. I mean, obviously the power content label, but given that the label is actually not indicative of our true power content, which in the two bar graphs would be, I mean, to our two carbon intensity, which was more like the one on the left. I mean, that doesn't really worry me.
Anybody else? Come on, Chris.
I'll just say thank you, Jim. This was the homework that I was referring earlier I'd need to do. So this was very informative.
So Jim, have we gotten any pushback on the power content label? I mean, one of the arguments that Palo Alto makes is, we do all these things so we can show we're a leader because it actually doesn't move the needle on climate. So the whole point is to actually try and model this for other people. So by not having it on the power content label, do people think we're not modeling it and that we're not actually achieving what we say we achieve? And is the extra money we make off of it moving the needle in some other way that actually matters?
Yeah, good question. I'm not aware of any pushback we've received in terms of our power content label changing. Although if Catherine Elvert is still in the room, I would defer to her since she's probably more in touch with customer views on that.
Catherine Elvert, Utilities Communications Manager. Jim is correct. We have not received any negative feedback on the power content label. We have not distributed this year's power content label. That will be going out in the month of December to residents in their utility bill inserts, but none so far.
Okay. All right. So what are you looking for from us? A vote?
Yes, we'd like to go back to that recommended motion to that, the UAC.
I move the recommended motion as formulated by staff.
Sorry, Chair Sharp. Public comment.
Let's do public comment. I'm sorry.
Thank you. If any member of the public would like to speak on item number 4, please raise your hand or press star 9 now. No hands raised.
Okay. You were going to make a motion.
I thought I did.
I didn't get a second then.
I move the staff recommended motion.
I'll second that.
All right. You want to call the roll?
Commissioner Tucker,
Yes.
Vice Chair Mater,
Yes.
Chair Sharp,
Yes.
Commissioner Phillips.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0.
All right. And then I think we're on to the last item, which is commissioner comments and meeting events. Do we have any commissioner comments?
Yes. Let's see, just in closing, I want to call attention to an article in the local paper called "Data Centers Drive Surging Electricity Demand," and reflect on the number of times that we here at UAC have asked for perhaps a discussion. I think it is now in the work plan, and I'm not certain, but I think it's in the probably calendared in the months ahead. But it seems really important that we get a little bit ahead of, or at least catch up with all this enthusiasm for data centers, enthusiasm that I personally think is misunderstood or lacks analysis. This article talks about surging data center. I've listened to council members talk about data centers growing and growing with no end in sight. It's used as, I think, it's a major chunk of the load forecast starting this year and going over 5-10 years. But never is there discussion about who these data centers are. In other words, who these customers are that are building data centers, why they'd be building them in Palo Alto, whether Tesla is an absolute anomaly, or whether there are indeed very good reasons that a large tech company would want AI data centers here where power is cheap relative to PG&E, but not cheap relative to the Columbia River Gorge. And so it's hard to understand. I'd love to see that staff understands and what the local market opportunity and trend is for data centers. Because in all the talk in council meetings and in newspaper articles, there does seem to be a lack of that detail. You're led from this article to think that we have massive or major load increases coming, starting right now. 12% is one number. I can't remember the number of gigawatt hours, but something like I want to say 200 gigawatt hours over time, all driven by data centers. Let's please get a deeper understanding of that in the months ahead. I'd love to see us agendize that.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I mean, it's been one of my pet topics, and I'd like to see more than just an understanding, what is our stance? Are we, there's something we should be going out and saying, yeah, we want to build more data centers. It'd be great because it'll lower the rates, or no, we don't. Or, from a utility point of view, not, there's other aspects of the data centers from a city point of view that need to be considered. But saying, as a utility, it would be great if we had another, 5, 10 megawatts, because that would lower residential rates or not. I don't know.
I think this involves CPAU going out, and maybe you do this already, but talking to local industry experts who can comment on this, talking to our current.
I believe he has the information. You just need to share it.
You believe that? Well,
I know he got it from Santa Clara, because I know Santa Clara's got that stuff.
Santa Clara does not have our local customers, but okay, I think the point's taken.
I know that's not on the agenda, but in terms of the comments, as I mentioned in the director's report, is bringing back and agendizing that in the December timeframe. Appreciate the reinforcement of what the content and detail you're looking for in terms of what those are, and our intent is to bring that back to that commission at that time.
All right. Anybody else, any comments? Nope. With that, we're adjourned. And thank you.